Welcome to the Lowdown Podcast, the show where we dive deep into the topics that directly impact the evolving originator. I'm your host, Connor Bartley. Bam! And joining me today is someone who has done what a lot of people think might be the impossible in this market. They've accomplished growth in their business despite the difficult headwinds of the market. He's known as a problem-solving guideline guru and has really been intentional about building a team that become known for finding ways to yes. He's a team first, personal production second type of leader. Jared Evenson, thank you for joining the Lowdown.
Hey, thanks for having me, Connor. Has anyone ever told you you have a voice for radio?
All right. So we connected on LinkedIn several years ago, and I know I followed your content for a while. I've always really appreciated the perspective that you bring, the specificity of what you write, and it's kind of crazy that this is like the first time that we've ever actually met. It's the power of social media, and I know we're gonna have a great conversation today. But before we dive into everything, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, your background, your journey into the mortgage business, and things like that?
Yeah, no, I kind of accidentally got into the mortgage business. I grew up, I come from a really small town. I had 24 kids in my graduating class, I think. And yeah, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I was supposed to go to college. So I started off going that route, and I was not a studious person when it came to academics, if you will. And so I was struggling through actually community college, just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. It's criminal justice. And then it was, I wanted to be a teacher, right? And I wanted to coach and all these things. And it was just, I was doing it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And while doing that, I was picking up work along. I found sales jobs. I spent a minute selling cars one summer. I had a lot of success doing that. I was 19 years old, I think, and I knew I didn't want to do that though. School year started, and I left that and was selling cell phones. And I somehow eventually made my way. I was working at a Best Buy, and I had sold a very large. It was a 50-inch Pioneer TV with the Bose audio setup, right, and the whole nine, and it was one of my bigger sales that I had. And
was this pre-flat screen, or was
this was like right with like a 50-inch plasma was $10,000,
yeah,
and that
okay,
didn't include that didn't include the stand that you had to pay an extra $1,000 for the stand that it sat on if you didn't want to mount it on the wall, right?
And that thing was heavy, I bet.
Yeah, and it was crazy, and I knew what the guy did, and I ran into him at an event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, called Coeur d'Alene, and I saw him and his wife, and I'd probably had something to drink, and I asked him, "Hey, how's that TV package that I sold you, that Pioneer Plasma and whatever?" He was like, "I'm impressed you remember that, young man." Well, yeah, thanks. But not only a week later, I was showing up to work one morning, and I saw his wife coming out of the store, and his last name was Hansen, and I was like, "Miss Hansen, what are you doing? How can I help you?" She's like, "Well, I was going to return this iPod." I'm talking first generation iPods, the very first ones that came out. She said, "I was going to return it, but they told me that I have to deal with Apple directly." And I was like, no, you don't. Come with me. And I drug her back in this store, and I had them exchange it for her. She got an upgrade. Gen 2 was out by this point. So, they'd worked out some bugs or whatever, got her taken care of. And couple hours later, the phone rang. I was in the home theater department. I slung TVs, and it was her husband asking me to come out to his office and see him. And, ignorant me thought he just wanted to buy more TVs. So I'm like, "Hey, I got to run out to a customer's house." I ran out, and he was asking me to get into the mortgage business. And I almost, basically, it wasn't 2 weeks later, I think I was filling out my HR paperwork to go work for this little mortgage company, and the rest was history. So I really kind of stumbled into this, and I had kind of a friend mentor that was in the mortgage business that I looked up to, and he always was like, "You'd be great in the mortgage business." So it was in the back of my mind. I didn't really know what a mortgage was for the most part, like a lot of people that haven't been in this business or ever bought a house or that are 21 years old, but that's kind of how I fell into it. And it was just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're 21 and getting started in mortgage. I found that a lot of the people that join me on this podcast, like they went through, they studied hard, and you're a guideline guru. So I'm just curious, like, how much of that early time in the business was spent really diving into the details of it and making sure that you could show up with yes and find ways to win for those clients. And if it wasn't there in the very beginning, was there a moment that triggered that way of thinking and got you in that direction?
Kind of funny because back then, we were a broker at a company I worked for, and this was before the crash. You had 50 lenders that you worked with, and they all just emailed you, or they would come and drop off these little rate sheets. And the rate sheets had your loan level pricing adjustments and intricacies about what they do. We'll do 1 year out of bankruptcy, or we'll do a 580 credit score, or we'll do all these things. And you almost had to memorize all the different lenders and who could do what. And that was kind of what I figured out early on. Back then my brain worked a little better, and so I was able to just kind of know. And so I'd be sitting at my desk and I'd hear loan officers, that seasoned loan officers, talking about these scenarios, and I'd overhear it, and they'd just hear me like blurt from my little cubicle, like, use Rainland for that one, or use this for that one. And they'd be like, what, why? And I'd pull out my little rate sheet, look, you can do this, this and that. And they'd be like, okay. And so I realized early on, like, I had a knack for kind of knowing how to place things. And it took me all the way back to like when I was in school in my math classes, and my math teacher was my baseball coach, and I always got really bad grades in math, but I tend to always be able to come up with the right solution. It was just the way I got there wasn't the way I was supposed to do it. And so when it came to mortgage, I'm like, well, I know how to get the answer. I turn everything into a story problem in my head, and mortgage, everything's a story problem already, and you don't have to turn it into one. And so I just became this like problem. Yeah, I was taking loans, and other people were declining them, and I was fresh into the business and finding these solutions. I'm like, that's weird. How come I can do this and some of these other people have been around can't? And it's just not black and white. It's just whatever
Yeah.
reason my brain was wired to find ways to say yes. I was addicted to it.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, I love that. So along your career path, you were kind of in the bank side of things for a while, and then transitioned into, the retail side. And some people really struggle with that, because the bank business, depending on your community or where you live or what bank you work for, oftentimes it could be, the bank customers coming in, they've got an account with the bank, they want a mortgage, right? And going on to the retail side, you don't have that walk-in traffic. And so it can become, it can be a very different world to go out and self-generate those referrals and build the relationships. So how did you navigate that change, and what did you find really worked for you in doing that?
There's kind of like two parts to that question, or to my answer on that. And what had happened was, the market crashed. We all were around for that, or not all of us were. A lot of you guys weren't around for the market crash. I actually, I wasn't doing a lot of business at 21 year old. I maybe made $14,000 my first year, which was enough for me back then. But I actually was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. And there's like two pieces of advice that my dad ever gave me that I listened to. And one of them at that point was, he's like, come home. He's like, people know you here. People love you here. Now, home was only 90 miles away, right? From Spokane down to the Pullman, Palouse area, which is really rural Whitman County, farm town community.
Okay.
He's like, people love you here. They know who you are. You're going to find your way, right? So I went down there, and I was actually, I picked up some jobs just to hold me over, and I was trying to get back into mortgage. And if you remember Washington Mutual, they had a branch in Pullman, and I got a hold of the regional manager there, and he agreed to hire me to be the loan officer in Pullman. Well, I'm going through the background check. I do the drug test, ready to go, kind of quit the little side hustle I was doing, getting ready to start. And then the news came, Washington Mutual taken over by the Fed, shut down, Chase
Right.
takes over. And I was just like, well, what does this mean for me? And they froze hiring.
Yep.
and nobody had answers. They weren't hiring loan officers. They weren't hiring anybody. And that manager was kind of, he didn't have answers, but I was optimistic. And I'm calling him every couple of weeks. I was driving to his office and be like, hey, do you got answers for me? Like, I was persistent. I wanted this job. And eventually he's like, Jared, you need to give up. He goes, it's not that I don't want you. He goes, there's no direction here. And so I was like, crap. So I had to go find work outside of the mortgage business. It was, horrible, horrible jobs. And then finally I was like, I got to get in with the bank. So I got on and I took a personal banking job. And I just dove into mortgage because you got paid really good referral fees for referring mortgages to the mortgage loan officer. And we were having to use a guy out of Illinois. His name is Richie Fausek, cool cat. And I was just, this was the period of HARP loans where, they're saying, come in and as long as these guys have made their payments on time, we'll refinance them. And so I was referring HARP loans left and right. But then I started doing home buyer classes as a banker. And I started partnering with real estate agents with my branch referrals. So I had clients coming in who were saying, I need to get pre-approved for a house. I'd sit in on a conference call with them and our loan officer, and I'd get them pre-approved. And then I'm like, well, who's your realtor? They don't have one. So I was like, my head clicked. I'm like, I can create referral partners out of this. So I'm going to find the agents in town that if I send them deals, they're going to send them back to me. And I used that as kind of gold. And so all of a sudden, my little branch in Pullman is kind of leading the region in purchase business for Chase. And not a lot of people were using us, that for purchases then. It was very refinance heavy. And so then I'm like, all right, they got to hire me as a loan officer now. I'm referring out tons of business to the loan officer. Right. So I called the manager in Spokane and he's like, I don't want a loan officer in Pullman, 90 miles away. He goes, I don't want to have to deal with having to go down there or whatever. And I was just like crushed. I'm like, what? Yeah. Why not? Yeah. So I called the regional manager down in Boise and I was like, hey, here's my numbers. Called your cohort in Spokane. He doesn't want anything to do with me. And the guy in Boise was like, I'll hire you, like basically right on the spot. And he's fantastic. His name was Nick Morgan. Fantastic guy. He's not with the, he's land home now, I believe. And he brought me on. And just from there on, I'm like, God, I had a mentor. It couldn't have been a better mentor for me because he was fantastic. And so then I really leaned into using my branch customers to create more referral partners. And I was doing that in different regions that we serve. I had like 3 branches. And so I was doing it over a branch I had in Idaho and a branch I had in these other small towns. And then I took that, I got to a point to where I couldn't be there anymore. I was actually wanting to grow my business and I felt like I tapped out in that market. And so I was going back to Spokane and I was going up to Spokane blind. I was going to take a job with a new company. I went to a small regional bank and I had no referral partners up there. The bank that I went to already had an established loan officer where I was coming from. So it's not like I was going to try to it was too small of a community for me to try to tap into what was hers. I'm a team player. She actually helped me get the job in Spokane. And I showed up expecting, everyone to welcome me with open arms. Oh, there's a new guy. Let's help him out. And no, it was feast or famine. I go up there and I'm thinking I'm going to get, they're going to sign me some branches and I'm going to all the loan officers were like, no, this one's mine. This one's mine. This one's mine. You can have, Podunk town in the middle of nowhere, 130 miles from here that has a population of 40 people. And I was just like, oh boy, this isn't what I expected. And so I had to recreate myself right away. And, I got a few lucky breaks, a friend of mine was like, hey, I'm buying a house, but can I use you? And he set me up with his real estate agent who turned out to be a big hitter. And next thing you know, I'm doing 3 deals a month with this agent.
Yeah.
Well, that was cool. Then what I started doing I started meeting my clients in the different branches that my bank had around town. I wouldn't meet them at my office. I'd say, hey, meet me. I'd find what's close to their house or their work and I'd meet them there. And these branch managers kept seeing me and they actually didn't like the originators they were working with. And so they'd kind of start quietly referring to me. And they're like, we don't want to, they don't answer their phone. They don't pick up. And so I was just getting these and I used those clients to get more referral partners here in Spokane. And then I got enough referral partners out of that I was able to eventually one thing led to another, and I decided it was finally time. It was like 70% of my business was self-generated. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's time to pull the plug. It's time to rip the Band-Aid and just go out on my own. And I jumped on with the company that at the time was, had the number one market share for a retail lender in Spokane. And I jumped in with them head first and never looked back. And it was the best decision I ever made. It was gutsy though. Like you had to take a risk. And I felt my risk was calculated enough. Your commissions are a little more on the retail side than they are in a bank branch. And
Right.
so I was like, even if I do half the business, it's like income, I'm going to be fine. And so it's just a little less consistency. There wasn't that draw, there wasn't whatever. And so I ran with it and it worked out good. It was what I made of it. And I was happy I made that jump because I was tired of answering to tellers and giving updates to branch managers about
Yeah, I
stuff.
get it.
A client would walk into the branch and, to do a deposit, and someone would say, they'd know they're doing a mortgage. Hey, what's going on with your mortgage? They'd be like, oh, I don't know. And the next thing you know, you're in trouble. And it's like, no, they weren't saying they don't know what's going on with their mortgage. They were just like, you caught them off guard. I was like, man, so I had to get out of that and
Yeah,
become my
yeah,
own
I hear you.
boss. And that was nice.
Well, so I'm little behind the scenes here with the lowdown. For most guests, I'll send a little bit of a prep form to them, and something that you shared on that form was, one of the questions I asked was, what are some of the things, or what is something that used to frustrate you in this business? And I loved sort of the insight that you shared there. So I wanted to dive into that. I mean, as you grew in this business and things like that, like what would you say as you were mid growth, or really starting to find yourself as an originator, what was really frustrating you?
Gosh, I forgot what I put on my answer for that one.
Well, let's see what you come up with then.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
that.
The one of the things that, like, if I was growing that was frustrating, there's a handful of things, but one thing that I felt was that it wasn't always the best loan officers who got the most amount of business. And that frustrated me because, and now I was good at sales and I was good at being a loan officer too, but I'm seeing people that you feel like don't genuinely care about their clients, and everyone's just a number to them, and they're finding a lot of success. And that got to me because I was like, you know what, this isn't right. And that motivated me to work harder and to earn more referral partners and to get in front of more people, and to find, what one thing that really frustrates me is when a perfectly qualified client gets told, no, you can't buy a house
Mm,
because somebody in our industry didn't serve them right, or they didn't have the right leadership to get them the help they needed to help these clients. And that drives me nuts. I'm passionate that, like, if you've done the work to earn the ability to be a home buyer, you deserve the best shot at it. And I worked really, really hard to find those people. And I would have managers that would be like, at some point, like, give up on this. Like, why are you fighting so hard for this one? And I'd get so frustrated. I'd be like, because they're trying to buy a house. They're being wronged. They've done the right things. Someone's not understanding a guideline, or someone has misrepresented them. And I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to be the one that does take care of them. And I was passionate about that. And, like, I always felt like if I didn't have the leadership that was going to support me with that, I was going to go somewhere where I was going to get that support.
sure. Yeah.
And that's, I know that's not what I had on the intake form, but that's what came up just now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned that having a 5-star like mentality really changed the way you approach the business, and like, can you go into that a little bit more? Because I think
Yeah,
that's a great comment, and I just want to
it
explore it a
was.
little.
I'd gone to a Todd Duncan sales mastery or whatever that is in San Diego one year, and I was trying to figure out. I was kind of going through referral partners a little bit, where I'd have them for a while, and we would miss a bunch of closing dates, and or if the client was, if I was struggling with the client and, they weren't being reasonable, or they felt like I wasn't being reasonable with my request or whatnot, it was like, we'd get mad at each other, and then I wouldn't want to kind of give them the service they deserved, or I'd want to, but you're like, oh boy, I got to call them again. This isn't going to go well. I got to ask for another pay stub. They're going to yell at me. And that was frustrating to me. And I learned two things though, was that one, someone taught me this line, and I don't love using this line, but it was like, don't get mad, get paid. And what I love about that though, it's like, just get the deal done. Just, you know what? Maybe someone's being unreal. It's like the clients you work the hardest for sometimes are the ones that treat you the worst. And at least I can know I gave it my best. And so what I did though was I learned from a loan officer that I heard speak that they shot for 5-star reviews, like, and that changed their trajectory of their plan. I'm like, gosh, if every client I work with, if I got a 5-star review from every client I worked with, 5-star reviews typically mean that, like, I don't care that someone's going to Google me and see you got good reviews, but that person themselves, they're more likely to refer a friend to you, and they're more likely to come back to you. And I had this mentality. I'm like, gosh, if I could get like 3 deals out of every loan I close, maybe it's a future refinance, maybe it's a refinance from a coworker, maybe they buy a house down the road. And I was kind of using that as like my residual income plan. I want these clients to come back to me. I don't want to be chasing new clients my entire career. And so I did that, and I went like 18 months of all 5-star reviews. And one day I got my first like 2 after 18 months, and I wasn't even mad. Like, it was I knew it was coming, and I worked my tail off for this client, and it was just like, cool. And I used that as kind of like a springboard into the next, set of goals. And the guy that gave me a 2, he was the guy that, it was a guy and a gal buying a house together. She qualified on her own. He had a 620 credit score. The payment was going to be $300 cheaper if I kept him off the loan. And he's like, I don't want to do that. Nope, not doing it. Don't even tell her. I'm like, okay, well, so I wasn't surprised at the end of the day, but we got the deal closed, and the referral partners on that though, they had a great experience with me, and I kept riding that high. My next, it was another year later before I got my next non 5-star review, and it was the guy who was one of those doctors, that oncologists, whatever, they cure cancer or something.
Yeah.
And he, was the first client that wouldn't give me the time to do my spiel that I gave all my clients. Cause back then we met everyone in person.
Sure, yeah.
It was very hands-on, and he was just like, no, just do the application. I'm like, okay. Well, then at the end, this guy, he was like, how do I give my down payment to the title? Do I just write a check? I'm like, no, you need to either get a cashier's check or wire it. Well, he got mad that he didn't know that. I'm like, well, if I would have been able to do my spiel with you at the beginning, I could have done it, And so that was that. The same guy called me a week later. He's like asking me how he's supposed to mail a letter. And this was after he gave me his really horrible review. And I'm like, I don't know, man, but literally at the end of the block you live on is the post office. Just drop it in the thing when you drive by. Like, I don't know. So it was, I felt good about it, but I still do that to this day. I'm obsessed over, I watch my experience.com rankings and all that. And it's really important to me.
Well, I love that. I mean, even when I think about my own personal experience. So my wife and I, we bought the house we live in today 17 years ago. I still remember that loan officer's name because we were young, kids at the time trying to buy our first house. They gave white glove, service. They explained everything. Were great. Fast forward several years, we get a second or a home equity loan, and like it was all done over email, very transactional. I couldn't even tell you that person's name. I don't even remember the name of the bank we got it from. Like, if I didn't get the statement in the mail, I would never, it wasn't a memorable experience at all. So if anyone were to ever ask me, who's a great loan officer that I could work with, well, I know one that gave me a great experience. And so, that always stood out to me. So I think, just when we put things, and I guess the reason I share that anecdote is I think in our industry, with all the different kind of conversation that goes on and the different coaches that are out there and the different products or platforms that you can take a look at, and everybody's looking for like the magic pill. But in the end, it's how you make people feel that they remember. And if you're focused on that, it's a great place to start.
Yeah. And that can be hard when you get busy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, and that's where, you really have to take a step back and be like, what's important here? And how do I solve? You got to solve for it fast. Otherwise things are going to crumble. The everything will go downhill from there. And then you're back to square one again. And because I just bought a truck and, back in February, March, and I was back in the dealership getting it serviced, 3 months later, and we got baby number 3 on the way. Should be here any minute. And so I was I was toying the idea of getting my wife we have a Yukon now, but the Suburban or the Yukon XL. And I was in the dealership looking, and I'd mentioned I just bought my car, and the guy was like, "Well, what was your salesman name? Who are you working with?" And I was like, "I don't know." Yeah. You know what? And I didn't know, and I was like, "I'm not worried about." He didn't leave an impression. He wasn't bad, but it didn't leave an impression. I don't know his name. There was no follow up after I got the car, and so I was just gonna go to the next person that was willing to help me. Sure enough, after I talked to the guy, I turn around, I see him sitting at his desk, But I'm like, whatever, yeah. So, but yeah. But yeah, that's when you get busy though. That's when it really do you have processes in place to keep this working? And then you got to figure that out, which, I recently learned too and made some changes there that have been fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, that's where as you grow as an originator, I find through these conversations that there are sort of these milestone moments for, that go hand in hand with growth. And there are these, I call them level off or level up sort of moments where you have a choice and you can either say, okay, I'm good here. This is where I'm at. I'm just going to cap right here and we're just going to ride this out as long as we can. And then for others that want to continue growing, there's the level up change that needs to be made. There's some decision or some new process that needs to be implemented or a new hire that needs to be made, something that's going to advance things one step further. And so when I think about the people that listen to this show and, the evolving originator, people who've mastered basics but are looking to find more and get more out of the business, those are those milestone moments that you really have to look for. And I mean, you just called one out right there where growth starts to sort of become your enemy in a way, unless you make some sort of process change or really pay attention to how you're doing things. Because, I mean, you build it from zero and you get used to doing it all yourself. And then it's hard. It's a struggle. So to give things up or share, or make changes because you found a way that has worked in the past. But now if you want to do more, something's got to give. So that was a great call out. But listen, man, we've had a great conversation. I'm just, before we wrap things up, is there anything that you want to get out there that you want to share with this audience that could be useful or helpful to them, and as they contemplate growth and or facing some of those level off, level up sort of moments?
Man, yeah, when you're facing that, it's you got to position yourself for success. And what success is looks so different to everybody. My definition of success is way different than it was years ago. And you got to surround yourself with the right people that are there to support your success. You can have all these grand visions as an originator or a branch manager, but if you don't have that support in place to help you get there, you're not going to do it alone. You can't be a one-man show forever and continue to grow. And so I just tell people, surround yourself with great people. In the car business, I learned the car when I was 19 in the car business, I was in it for a long time. But someone told me on the first day, he pointed, there's this little tent out in the middle of the car lot and everyone was sitting under there smoking cigarettes. And he's like, you can go stand out there with the smokers and jokers and wait for the next up and form lots of bad habits. Or you can hang out over here where the top producers are and watch what they do. So that's what I did. And I would listen to the things they said to their clients. I would go sit at a desk and act like I'm working just to hear the conversations. And I did that as a loan officer too. When I was, in a branch every day, I would hear what people were saying. I was trying to pick something up. And if you surround yourself with good people or you listen to podcasts like this, take one little nugget, take something that you like. You don't copy it. I steal stuff from people all the time, but I make it my own. I was listening to something the other day where it was like, gosh, that's a great idea, but I don't want to do it that way. Maybe they're making phone calls. So I want to do it a different way. And right. I did, and I found immediate success with that. And so it's just surround yourself with people where you're going to learn and grow. And if you don't have those people right in front of you, find them. There's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, there's places where you can get all this information and knowledge for free. Yeah. And you can grow and you will. So
that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Great advice. I mean, in the end, you control the door. You determine who you hang out with, and sometimes that means you might need to stop hanging out with people. You need to be around. I'm going to butcher the quote, but from the book Who Not How, there was a great quote in there of, be around the people that represent your future and not your past. And if you can get into those crowds, you'll watch how things change for you.
Yep.
Getting in the right room is excellent advice. So,
Oh yeah.
Jared, I want to say thank you for joining me today. Congrats on baby number 3 on the way. I hope that, everything with that goes well and everyone's healthy and happy and it's a beautiful day. And, I just appreciate you coming on and joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Connor. It's a blast. Appreciate
Absolutely.
what you're doing out there for all us loan officers.
Thank you. Have a great one.
All right. Take care.